All right, so today I'm going to talk about maps, how you can build them, and the impact that they can have on the world. So who am I? I'm Colby Fayock. I'm the one taking a bite out of the world there. I work on UX and front-end side of things at Element 84. You can find me pretty much anywhere on the web just by Googling my name, as I'm the only one in the world. So looking at this first slide, it's a screenshot of Google Maps in downtown Alexandria, which is E84's HQ. We're probably all pretty familiar with Google Maps or Apple Maps and the features they provide. Like for instance, with this location, we can see things nearby or check out some of the pictures from the area and generally find some recommendations of what to do. This next screen is of public transit directions from my apartment to work. So when I don't have a car, I can get a good idea of how long it's going to take the metro to work. This next screenshot shows driving directions from my house where I grew up in Pennsylvania when I want to visit my family. It never actually takes under 4 hours to get there, but it's optimistic. So how many of you like to travel? Yeah, pretty much everybody. As much as we'd all love to be in another country every month, that's usually not feasible. So my wife likes to take virtual vacations around the world, which is better for our budget, but Google Maps lets her easily travel and check things out. Like here, we see an overhead view of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The cool thing about this, though, is we can get a street view look of this and get a close-up look and see actually how big this thing really is. When I was talking to her about this, she was in the middle of one of her virtual vacation journeys, and she wandered to a place called the Valley of Geysers, which is located in Russia on the Kamchatka Peninsula. Hopefully I said that right. It turns out this geyser field has the second largest concentration of geysers in the world. And the neat thing about this is we can check this kind of place out even if we'll never have the opportunity to go. It's obviously not the real thing, but we're still able to get a glimpse of remote places all around the world. So where does all the data come from to actually build these features? Well, first, you have the obvious scientists and analysts. This is just kind of a stock photo I found at GIS University, but they're constantly hard at work collecting and processing data. You also have technology. Thanks to the cars and the people who build Google Maps Street View, we can get our close-up of the pyramids and a few fun Easter eggs along the way. Then we have satellites that produce a lot of the overhead imagery that you see and the data that's collected along with it. A good example of this is MODIS Terra. MODIS stands for Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer. It covers every point on Earth with its image sensors every 1 to 2 days. They collect large-scale global dynamics like cloud coverage, ocean processes, and changes in the atmosphere. There's thousands of satellites like that flying overhead right now. Some of them aren't even working, but many are still operational. A lot of them have been collecting images and data about our planet. This graphic is from 2016 by the Planetary Society, so it's probably a little out of date, but it shows the state of missions operated by NASA at the time. The cool thing about the satellites, though, are not only do they give the tools to work with, but we can get a daily dose of the view from above on Instagram. So at the top, you see the International Space Station, which isn't a satellite, but it shows the Earth at night, which I think is pretty cool. The bottom is from Daily Overview, showing a fascinating look at Lake Natron in Tanzania. And then on the right, you have a gorgeous look at the Andaman Sea from NASA Earth, which is on the border of Burma and Thailand. But switching back to maps for a second, this is, again, just downtown Alexandria. But behind that, it's OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap, or OSM, is an open source project that allows mappers all over the world to contribute to building a map of that said world. So this means another source of this data is you, all of you fine people. And with our powers combined and everything. But millions of people, whether together or part of a community, like all the ones you see here, have maps on OSM. Thousands of them are working every single day on this. They're adding points of interest and drawing streets, and it's not just helping the United States figure out a little bit more about the area, but it's helping third world countries all around the world. So this is incredibly helpful from a humanitarian aid perspective, where here we can see an identified refugee camp on the border of South Sudan and Ethiopia. So where am I going with all this? The point I'm trying to make here is that it's more than just driving directions. They're helping save the world. Tons of research is going on in many different areas, from climate change to agriculture. These maps are literally giving scientists tools to make a difference in people's lives. Some examples that you can find online are services like NASA's Worldview. Here we see Tropical Cyclone Idai, which is one of the worst cyclones on record to affect Africa in the southern hemisphere. Another is NASA's Firm service, which allows you to see active fires all around the world. Here we can see a cutout of the campfire wildfires from last year, which shows the number of active fires in the area. This helps teams manage resources for determining how they can actually help in those scenarios. And it's not just NASA. There are a ton of well-known teams doing great work to help. USGS is helping map out earthquakes, USDA is monitoring food access, and they're all working towards providing more information to the people who can actually make a difference, which is directly translating to lives saved. Luckily, I'm here to tell you that getting started with maps is probably not as bad as you think, so let's break it down a little bit. Mapping applications kind of look like your standard JAMstack app. For those unfamiliar, JAMstack sites are JavaScript APIs and markup. It's pretty much a static HTML website, but utilizing JavaScript in the browser to make the request to any APIs and provide the dynamic data. It's not necessarily a new idea, but the architecture has a cool name now, which means you can get some cool references. But the mapping applications kind of look like the JAMstack app, where you have the JavaScript that makes the app itself run. You have the APIs, which are your imagery and your data, which compiles down to the markup, which gets served to the person using the app. So starting from the top with JavaScript, which is probably why all of you are here today, we're going to look at Leaflet, which is the most popular mapping library available right now. Here we have a simple example of a map that we get from Leaflet's homepage. The map itself is pretty basic, but we have a simple marker and a pop-up along with it. Behind, we're serving OpenStreetMaps, which I mentioned before, which is providing us our base map layer. So how do we get there? Believe it or not, this small snippet of code is what produced that map. So let's break that down a little bit. From the top, we create a map instance, and we pass in an ID for the div that we want to mount it on. It's kind of similar to how you pass an ID to React. It doesn't work the same way, but the idea is the same, where you pass the ID to mount it. Then we set the position we want the map to be centered on using the longitude, latitude, and then a zoom level. Next, we describe the layer that we want to add to the map, which is called a tile layer. I'll explain a little bit more about tile layers in a bit, but we add the URL for the endpoint for that layer and an attribution to give the service credit. So this will give us the base of the map, but how do we get that marker? This last snippet creates the marker instance, sets the position, again using the latitude and longitude, and binds a pop-up message with it to appear with the marker. Lastly, we open it in its place. And after that, again, we have our basic map example. So if you're anything like me, and I think most of you are, you like to build your applications in React. So luckily, there's a library that takes Leaflet and builds out components to natively support that map. Here we have an example that's shown on the React Leaflet homepage, and if you notice, it's the same exact map as you saw before, but now it's built with React components. Breaking this down again, we have our map component wrapping everything, which we set our coordinates and our zoom. Inside that, we have our tile layer component, where we add our URL and attribution again. To add our marker, we add a marker component. We nest inside that a pop-up component where we add our simple text. And we have our basic map example again. So not too bad. So getting there isn't bad, but let's talk about the data that actually goes into building that map. When dealing with maps, I like to think of a poorly drawn cake. The base map is the actual cake, and then you have your overlays that are kind of like your icing, and then data that's kind of sprinkled on top. Your base map typically looks like something like OSM, which I mentioned, Modus Terra, as we saw before. Your overlays could be anything from a small sample of high-res imagery to heat maps. And then on top of that, your data can literally be anything that you can reduce down to a shape, such as active fires or evacuation zones. And starting to dig a little bit further on the base map idea, this is essentially the map imagery that you have available for the entire globe. So this will be the foundation of your map. This is what's called your tile layers, which are composed of a bunch of small tile images that make up one large image. If you could see at the top there, we have our tile endpoint with a few properties that we sub out. In this example, we have our date, we have our zoom, and we have an X and Y axis that gets programmatically swapped out for. We can just as easily swap that out for an OSM endpoint. But the reason for this is we don't want to have to pull down huge image files, which could be over 1 gigabyte in size. So imagine somebody trying to load that in the browser, when realistically they may only use a fraction of that map. Overlays are very similar to your base map, but a lot of the times you don't have nearly as much imagery available, which makes them an overlay as opposed to a base map. This could be something, like I said, the high resolution imagery for only a portion of the map, like you see here, or if you wanted to show a different kind of image over your base map, such as the heat map. Here we have the population density over top of OpenStreetMap. You can see in the middle there, DC, and then you can see a little part of Philly on the top right. This is more imagery that I was able to find available at NASA's resources. And then generally we have data, which we can use in really any way that we want visualized by shapes, such as here we're adding individual points on the map to identify each of those individual fires. But you can also use lines, circles, polygons. Here we have a fire boundary for the same wildfires on top of OSM, where the points are very helpful to see each individual active fire. Seeing the boundary is a little bit more easy to comprehend from an area of danger point of view. But the point of this is there really aren't any requirements for the data, but there are standard data formats that you can use to interface with Leaflet, such as GeoJSON, that I'm not going to get into here. Now, some of the data is free, some of it's not. Fortunately, NASA has made a lot of public data available, such as their tile endpoints and the overlays that you've seen here, which make it easy to kind of plug and play. But others, such as Digital Globe, provide open access to limited data, such as disaster data, which was the high-resolution imagery I showed earlier. And the rest of it would kind of be a premium product that you would have to pay for. So once you have your application built out, the last step is to compile it down and serve it to a browser. Compiling the app is pretty much what you would expect for any Webpack-based app. You can use your favorite tool like Create React App or Gatsby. When using one of these tools to build out your app, though, it compiles down to the static HTML, JS, and CSS. And once you have that compiled version, you can really serve it from wherever you want, whether that's GCP, AWS, or Netlify, which I've grown pretty fond of lately. So what kinds of things can we build with this? So we've been working pretty hard at E84 with first responders in disaster scenarios to come up with a really easy-to-use UI where they don't have to think very hard about the information that they want to get to. We call this FilmDrop.dr, where we can plug and play really any data source in an easy way to visualize it. The hope here is that whether somebody wants to look at the active fires or the boundary, they don't have to fumble around with advanced settings just to get there. Another feature we added is the ability to add data points to the map. So if someone reported a missing person, they can easily add this data point to the map and sync it up to the cloud for others to see. The cool thing, too, is we can utilize the browser local storage and save it so that if they don't have network connectivity, they can store it there until they do get that network connectivity to sync it up. On top of that, we want to provide the ability to let people collect the data in situ and immediately make it available. So someone with a drone can map out an area, upload it to their computer, sync it to this app, and make it available as a new layer, as you see here. This imagery is actually from a coworker of mine who flew his drone up over Lake Lansing in Michigan. FilmDrop gets a little bit more interesting on the data side. Not to go down a rabbit hole, because this is JavaScript and React, but we're building this thing to be able to upload directly to an AWS Snowball Edge, which is that gray box that you see sitting on with the laptop sitting on top of it. It's basically a cloud in a box, and this gives people out in the field another way, another level of processing power and capabilities that they didn't really have before. With this and along with the other work we've been doing, it was actually just announced on Wednesday that we're launch partners for AWS's new public safety and disaster response competency. It's a little bit meta on a stage here showing someone on a stage, but this is a screen capture from the stream where they just announced it. So what makes this impactful? Well, the hope is that we can get first responders the information they need to be more productive and efficient in the field. That could directly equate to more lives saved in many scenarios. So realistically, imagine someone in an area without cell service. They can fly a drone up, upload that data to the Snowball Edge, which processes it and provides this ability to visualize it on the map. This can show things like in the areas that are impacted by fire so that it's understood to no longer go there because it's not safe. Another thing I'm working on is an app with one of our customers in the commercial satellite space. We're working closely with Capel Space to provide an easy way for scientists to look up and analyze their data they've collected with their satellites. Here, it's a basic search of San Francisco where we can see all the imagery they have available in the results. Once you select one of those results, though, you can get a closer look and actually visualize that overlay on top of the map. This comes with a bucket of metadata, so for the people who use this kind of stuff every day, they'll have more that they can dive into. If Capella doesn't already have the imagery they want, we can actually interface with their satellites to task it in real time. So once Capella receives this request, they'll utilize the open and close window to actually capture imagery the next time their satellite passes over that area of interest. So again, what makes this impactful? We're providing a way for scientists to easily discover and analyze data from satellites. This gives them more tools and information to make better decisions that could impact people on this planet. And next we have Santa. Yes, that's Santa. Of course, we can have a little fun with this too. I put together a little demo utilizing the Google Santa Tracker API, which isn't really official. It's not an official API, but one of the people who is working on it said that it might actually be going away. But this allows us to see Santa's route and its current location. Their API is still set from last year, so if you go to it live, you'll see it like the above, but that resets on the 24th when Santa's actually in flight. It might be hard to see. The snippet shows reaching out. It's actually pretty big. Reaching out to the Santa API, grabbing his route, and then creating a bunch of shapes and markers that help us visualize that out. Part of the route payload also shows how many gifts were delivered. So we can see in the DC metro area last year, it was almost 7 billion gifts. If you're curious or interested in getting your hands dirty, I have this up on the source code up on GitHub, which I'll actually post to my Twitter later, which isn't a hint to follow me or anything. And for the last time, what makes this impactful? Well, for me, it was just fun to build. I love the holidays. But for these types of things, like Google's actual Santa Tracker app, this brings joy to many kids and adults all over the world. Now, when I talk about we, I really mean all of us. I want to drive home the point that any of us can do this. The tools that we have available to make this is able to make this accessible to anybody to build with. To help that a little bit, I put together a Gatsby Starter, where we can easily and very quickly spin up a mapping app with very little fuss and immediately become productive. So using the Gatsby CLI, you can create a new project with a Git address. This grabs the project and installs the NPM dependencies, which after that you would run yarn or npm develop, whatever is your favorite, and that spins up your local server, and you have your mapping app. It's simple. I've been trying to add features little by little to this, but it gives a good foundation to get started in mapping with in a React app. Or even if you want to get involved from an actual mapping perspective, drawing streets, adding points of interest, OpenStreetMaps gives you a lot of tools to get started. If you go to openstreetmap.org, they have a vast wiki and some good walkthroughs on how to use their tools. This screenshot is showing the roads and locations around the White House here in DC. It gives you the opportunity to be part of a huge community of mappers working every day to fix and keep this updated. So before I sign off, I want you all to think, how do you use maps? What features do you use every day that you never really actually thought of how they worked? Maybe next time you go to pull up Google Maps widget for your landing page, you can create your own with Leaflet. And that's it. Thank you. I'll be wandering around, so feel free to grab me to chat.